Okay.
All right, everyone. Well, on behalf of Will, my co-organizer, I'd like to welcome you guys to the fourth installment of Decentralize Colorado. For those of you who haven't attended before, we set out about 4 months ago in the wake of the ETH Denver Hackathon to present a platform-agnostic meetup that has anything to do with decentralization. So over the course of the past 3 months, we've had some really cool talks. What tonight's going to be is 5 to 6 lightning talks, about 10 minutes each. We've got do we have a timer? We have a timer, so it's going to be superficial. And then afterwards, each presenter will get about 2 to 3 minutes for a Q&A. And we'll just try to move things along. For everybody who wants to socialize afterwards, we'll be heading to Rory's Tavern across the street afterwards if you want to grab a beer and continue some more informal conversations. So to start things off, we've got a lot of organizers and leaders in the community here tonight. So we're going to open up the floor to announcements. So we'll just use this microphone, pass it around. Does anyone have a meetup or?
Hello, I'm Daniel, and I run the Den of Closure. It's a meetup group about the Closure programming language. Blockchain isn't the only technology that likes immutability. It's firmly baked into Closure. And if you want to learn more, I meet Thursday on the 28th to learn about how Closure script, which involves JavaScript, integrates great with D3 and maybe the best way of working with D3. Thanks.
Right. Announcements, yes. Yeah. We want this to go.
I'm already shilling. Hi, I'm Shayla Burrows. I'm one of the organizers of Crypto Leadways. We like to have a broad spectrum of chats. Next Monday, it's going to be about cold storage 101. So if you have friends who are just dipping their toe in this, great one to come to. We'll use Key and literally go through the whole process end to end, so they feel like they're leaving an expert.
Where are you guys meeting for the next one?
At an office.
Sorry to put you on blast there.
I don't know the address.
Oh, okay.
But it's on meetup.com. It's at Garlic Media. And I have no idea where it is in Denver, but I'll figure it out later. 1195. Yes, thank you.
Dang.
Hello, my name is Kevin Iwaki, and I am a organizer of Boulder Blockchain Meetup, among other things. Let's see. First off, we have some new Boulder Blockchain swag, which we're using to pitch Boulder Blockchain. Bill, give us a twirl. Thank you. And then also, so we've got a very special Boulder Blockchain Meetup coming up 2 weeks from tomorrow. Our meetups are every other Wednesday in Colorado. Zuko from Zcash, which is a top 10, top 20 project, is going to be presenting at Boulder Blockchain, so check it out. Anyone else?
Dan?
Hey guys, my name's Dan Shields, and I run a meetup on Thursday nights. It's Denver Bitcoin and Crypto, and we're down, if you guys know what REI is, we're across the parking lot right next to the flat. So we always have a great time. We start around 6:30 or so, and a whole bunch of good food and drinks and just a whole bunch of good connections. This week we're going to be doing these breakout sessions where we go like topical small groups, and it's kind of like a highlight. Everybody says it's awesome. So I'd love to have you guys join us. And otherwise, yeah, I think that's it.
Anyone else? All right, cool. Okay, so tonight is being sponsored by my employer, KJ Technical, and I thought I would pass the mic to Nick, have a little word from him.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad everybody's able to come out. We really focus on blockchain roles, but really anything in the technical sphere here in Denver. Just want to say we're really looking for DevOps folks tonight, anybody with a Linux background, anybody with a QA background as well. But you can talk with me, Trevor, Steve's back here. We really just love talking with anybody in the blockchain space or that has an interest in the space. So hit us up. We just love being part of the community. But does anybody else have any jobs you want to talk about tonight?
Yeah, go ahead, man. Oh, okay, cool. All right, cool. Well, without further ado, our first speaker tonight is an extremely active member in the local community. He actually spoke at our second installment when there was all of 9, 10 of us in attendance. But Duke Crawford keeps busy working on GIFs and protocols. So, yeah, take it away, Duke.
Well, hey, thank you. Yeah. Okay, first of all, thanks, Will, for. Does this work?
Keep it on your.
This work.
Yeah.
This works.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you, Will. Thank you, everybody. This is a little amorphous. It's kind of a long presentation. It's going to go real fast. I'm working on a picture wiki. Because visual information is really fast to process. So Wikipedia is kind of stale. And so I'm using GIFs in there, and I love GIFs. GIFs are a medium of attention. They're easy to use. And they're hard to pronounce. GIF, GIF. Anybody? GIF. GIF. Okay, you guys tried it out. So a lot of people hate GIF. They think it's old, cumbersome, outdated technology, but GIF keeps on giving. The format refuses to die. It's anti-fragile. It's 2 times older than Bitcoin. It's uncensorable. It's really easy to copy. It's fast distribution, and it's fair use. Does anybody know what fair use is? Legal fair use. Okay, it's like you don't have to. It's permissionless copying if you are commenting, if you're transforming, or if you're critiquing a copyright. So you can kind of have legal copyright control. But it's de facto fair use because you don't need servers. You just move this stuff around. It's really hard to censor. So that's a lot like Bitcoin, a lot like money. It enjoys a network effect. All browsers support it. 1 billion Giphies are served daily. There are 200 million GIFs online. How do we 10x that? Well, GIF has these unused containers in the format since 1988. Right? Nobody's figured out how to synchronize audio with them until we did. So there's stuff we can put in there. We can put applications. We can put links, comments, data, immutable data, Mr. Closure, and applications. The applications can contain audio-visual conversations that aren't rooted or stuck in servers. They can distribute applications. Perhaps money. So this is real. This is a way that this is a game that we put in GIFs, and you can tap along and synchronize vocal text. So this actually has a use because what we do is we pull loops from YouTube's, like 10-second, 5-second, and we send the audio off to Watson. Watson sends us a transcript, and we get it timed to the syllables, but we can fix the transcript, and we can send the corrections back to the AI that's creating the transcription. So there's an actual kind of cool use case for AI and language. It's a game of GIF. We can add visual context, again, because you think fast in pictures, charts, pictures, videos, and remix, so you can switch out pictures for sounds or sounds for pictures. Get a lot of flexibility and expression with these GIFs. You can ask questions, have conversations, make proposals, make decisions, yay, nay. It might look something like this, I don't know yet. Tommy's working on a contract, but basically for a GIF you can have a question or a conversation. You want to meet up, talk about dystopia, yes or no? Yes, okay. So it can be sort of like a visual interface to decision making. Actions, crowd power, oh look. Perhaps we can put market protocols on here. Whew. Okay, it's a lot of information, but basically it's getting towards an attention economy. Right? Because that's the scarce resource. Here's Reese. And, Web 2.0, it's pretty hacked. Our attention is pretty hacked. We want to take it back. Oh, look, there's Kevin. You know, so what if money isn't the most scarce resource? What if it's attention that's the scarce thing? How do we design an economy around that? Back to the big picture. Oh, look, there's John. You know, where are we? We're in a pretty big paradigm shift. Trent McConney of Ocean Protocol calls it Life 2.0. He sees self-owning robots and cars and everything going around. We're editing genes. We're in programmable life. It's even bigger than money. So with money, like we want to define it, how flexible are we? Can we make it the root of all good? Can we make it more trustless than it is now? Yes. Me, I want easy to spend money, hard to steal money, good to trade money. I don't want BS about money, worry about money, or man-in-the-middle attacks, personally. But I think there's a problem. Internet protocol is full of man-in-the-middle attacks. It creates paths between endpoints that are chock full of attack vectors. And one of the problems that Bitcoin blockchain deals with is Sybil attacks, sock puppets, fake accounts that can attack a network and flood it with baloney. So, do we have a choice? Whoa, this one didn't work. A lot of people are working on it. You know, we want to solve this problem. That's Hannah. Sorry, the text didn't get in there. Hey, it's a real problem. The IP is like affecting our money. It's in our underwear. Basically, it's in our Echo. It's in our Siri. It's in everything. It's very invasive, privacy offensive, and slow. And it's coming in our bodies. That's really weird. But Neuralink is coming into our brains. MIT has bots that go in your blood, and those communicate by IP, Internet Protocol. Do we have a choice? This is like a root problem. It's a big opportunity, and it is a paradigm shift. And we can fix it. Help me do this crowdfunding. I'm trying to put it together. The solution is in the router. This is where the magic happens. This is where we connect with our environment. There's lots of options. It's not only me thinking about this. Skycoin is on it, Illuvio, Toda Network, RENA, Blocks Root, NKN, Name Data Networking, and maybe a word protocol, which could be AI keeping track of a lot of hash and timestamps and things that are hard for humans to track, and then humans able to rename and trade. Personally, and we get into a lot of this with the blockchain conversations, are you on Slack, or is this Discord, or are you on Riot, or what's the intermediary? What's the man in the middle? We don't need that. We're interested in people and words, and we can build that in the router. There's Alan Kay. The word, the reason it's great is because it's just, look, human language is the mother of all inventions. It's how we communicate. It's like the OG operating system of the brain. Now, with this router, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but with this router, this is important. We're in exponential capabilities. Terabytes hold years of MP4 video. Times 1,000. In 2030, we'll have millennia of memory on our phones. So are you going to be calling Mark Zuckerberg and logging into his computer and asking him for permission to see your memory? Or is routing and network design going to adapt to this new capability? So it's kind of about owning words, owning your memory, owning your agreements. There's old examples of this. Visa did a distributed autonomous organization, kind of, in 1970. We can model off of that for an organizational principle. And so just after an ecosystem where gifts are self-owning, and we can interact with them, and maybe Pico pay to play, but basically A/B test stuff and work together and experiment and learn in this paradigm shift. The market is huge for secure money. It's just sort of over the top. Of course, we start like minute. It's only heretics. We'll probably be interested. Technology grows really fast. Who wants safer internet? Who wants faster, better performant internet? Who wants safer money? The protocol layer, I think a lot of people do. Who owns your router? Do you? So another question is Colorado follow Zug, right? Anybody know what Zug is? It's a town in Switzerland where Ethereum was born. which is great. It's a beautiful ecosystem, but do we have to only follow that, or can we blaze new trails? Up to you. Well, that's Colorado Coin. This is in honor of John. And that's it. Any questions? Or feedback? I'm learning how to do this.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
Just you're doing
Duck straight into
you're doing crowd.
Yeah. It's you know what it could be? It could be a decision between taking a body of money, like an initial 10 grand or 50 grand or whatever, and saying, or we're going to A/B test routers, or we're going to A/B test GIFs, perhaps. So that can be a contract, and it could be like a vote. And if it reaches a mass, but basically I'm doing two things. One is a distributed GIF application, and the other is to do things with that, to fund things like router investigations, router research, router learning, or, in the big scale, smarter money. Whew. It's over with.
All right, thanks a lot, Duke.
Yes, thanks.
So Shayla, do we have the husband in the house? Ready to rock? Okay, cool.
Let me take this down for a second. Good.
Hopefully there's less sweating. It's all fun and games till someone pulls a hammy. All right, so up next, we've got Shayla Burrows, who already kind of introduced herself earlier. She runs the Crypto Mondays meetup. Shayla Burrows is the head of business development and operations for the Satis Group. She has more than 10 years of business development and operations experience, having both worked in both private and public companies, as well as with the U.S. government. Prior to Satis, Shayla was a product and research team manager at Bridgewater Associates, a hedge fund that manages over $160 billion for more than 350 clients globally. Shayla is a Dartmouth Venture Fellow, a 2013 Startup Leadership Program Fellow, a member of Barnard College's, did I say that right? I probably butchered that, Athena Management Masterminds, and a Dartmouth College Rockefeller Leadership Fellow. She holds a BA in Government from Dartmouth College. Take it away, Shayla.
Pretty much a useless word.
Yeah. English major.
Hey guys, thanks so much for being here. At the last Crypto Mondays, I had a really fascinating conversation with someone wherein they spent the first 30 minutes telling me why they were bearish on security tokens, and then the next 30 minutes talking to me about why they are bullish on security tokens. He was a very passionate man. So I wanted to choose that subject to talk about tonight because I think there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of information out there. Some of it's good information and some of it's not so accurate as well. So what is a security token and how is it different from everything else, right? You've got utility tokens, which is analogous to an amusement park ticket to access a closed-end system, and then you have a security token. And the reality is, at a very functional level, they're basically the same. Where they start to differ is at a legal and a financial level. So a security token, for example, is basically saying, I'm going to promise you a return on investment. And that is where the two start to divide. A really good example of a security token that's out there is BCAP token, blockchain capital. So that's a good one to kind of take into account. Now, how many people have heard of the Howey test? Okay, a ton. Who hasn't? All right, okay. I think this is really important because essentially what we're dealing with is super new financial and technological systems against super old case law. And the case law is defined for securities by and large by the Howey test, among other things. But this is really one of those big things. And the 4 legs of it are, is this an investment of money with the expectation of profits from that investment in a common enterprise, and any profit that comes from a third party? So Howey test ends up being a really important mechanism for defining it. Hopefully, the way that security tokens are really dealt with will evolve along with the case law. But what are the benefits, right? There are very real benefits and there are very real cons to having a security token. The first benefit for investors is liquidity. There are a tremendous number of illiquid assets out there on the market. I see you shaking your head. I like you. And this really gives us the investors the option to go liquid much sooner, 8 years sooner than they would ever have a chance to on their current investments. The other benefit to it is transparency, right? You can hook additional information or updates onto that token. You can attach a variety of mechanisms to it, which I'll get into in the next slide. So really, there are very real benefits as an investor. A con that we're coming across, because I work for a security token advisory, is the super heavy crypto investors love their utility tokens. They can put a huge old investment in there and then flip it right when it goes on the market, make a ton of money. With security tokens, there's usually a lockup on that time. You can't do that. And so right now, there's a bit of pushback from investors, but I'll go into that a little bit later. There are very real benefits for founders, too. Who doesn't love non-dilutive funding? I like money. Does anyone else like money? Just me? Okay. I'll take it all. The SEC, as you may have heard, is not really a fan of utility tokens right now. I'm looking forward to an evolution in regulatory thinking on this issue. I think it will be very interesting, but it's a good way to stay safe and stay out of jail, which is another favorite thing of mine, right behind money. I think the last big benefit that we're starting to see is a lot of flexibility, which is great. A way to issue dividends in a really cool way, a way to issue different voting rights. There are so many things as a founder you can do with this. And as a former founder, I'm a huge fan of new finance mechanisms because, frankly, shaking down VCs gets super old super fast. Not that I shake down VCs. I don't do that ever. To give you an idea of what this market looks like, it's gargantuan. And if you took 0.3% of all of the illiquid assets that are actually on the market and you turned it into a security token, you're talking 1 trillion. So by order of magnitude, why everyone is so jazzed and so hyped on this is because we're talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars hitting the market just through a new finance mechanism. And that's really exciting. So when are we going to the moon, right? Is there a ton of money in this yet? And the answer is no. And so it's strange for a security token advisor to get up here and say, hold on a second, there are really very real downsides to this, but I think it's really important to know if you're even considering it or you want to buy into it. You're going to see all sorts of hype. It's hitting now at, in TechCrunch and VentureBeat and Investopedia. I picked 2, but this was of hundreds. So why are investors taking a little bit to catch on to this? And there are 2 main buckets. The first is the lack of infrastructure. No matter what anyone is hyping on the internet, no exchanges have actually been launched. You can't beta test them. They're just not out there yet. 2, custody solutions, custody and control solutions, which are a huge part of functioning, are at least 2 to 3 months from going live. That's going to be a big part of actually helping this function. The third is the uncertain regulatory environment, which I wake up to every day, and it's fun. And the fourth is just we're in really early days of protocol technology. We got to see where it goes, and I feel bullish, but that's me. I think the second big bucket is the value proposition hasn't been proven yet. As bullish as we all are, and as exciting as it is, we don't really have a lot of data or precedent to go on. And when you start to look at the headlines that are coming out, you're seeing blank is raising 250 million for security tokens, another VC is raising 100 million, and I think all that hype is awesome. I want this industry to grow, but it's all vapor until it's on paper and the money's in the bank. So until those funds are investing in security tokens will also take time behind it. So who is investing? So there are two major buckets of investors. You've got your traditional equity, family offices, Wall Street types, and then on the other side, you've got super early crypto whales who only hold tokens, but they love their utility tokens. There's a small sliver in the middle that's starting to grow, and that's where security token land is. And who's coming in? The security token funds that I was talking about that are starting to raise right now, family offices that are willing to go outside their comfort zone just a little bit, and utility token holders who will take a bet and diversify. So that's really where people are starting to shake out. Thanks for letting me talk about the wonderful, mystical world of security tokens.
Thanks, Shana. Anyone have any questions for Sheila?
You said no exchanges exist yet. So is Binance, you don't consider Binance an exchange? Is it more of a pseudo brokerage?
Well, how do you feel about the US law? I would say no one is yet prepared to handle security tokens appropriately. Issues custody and control. I think there are some really great issuance platforms and some people who are really going to change that. But no, not yet. They're handled so differently.
Aren't tokens functions supposed to be like utility rather than being backed up by real money? Because I'm pretty sure, isn't that what cryptocurrencies are for? Why are security tokens better than cryptocurrencies?
Can you
Like tokens.
say that in a slightly different way?
Alright. Cryptocurrency is more like a coin, like money based, whereas tokens are more intended for utility. So what's the difference between security tokens and a cryptocurrency coin?
A cryptocurrency coin is going to be a store of value, right? Like Bitcoin. It's behind. It draws its value from people feeling there's value in it, right? And a security token is going to be backed by a real asset, real estate.
Why don't you just use proof of stake for a cryptocurrency coin? If that makes sense.
How are you thinking that would function? Because utility and security are very different, or are the same in functionality, and the only thing that becomes different is literally how you market it.
Okay, because like to my understanding, there's different. Yeah, to my understanding, there's different proofs like for work, proof of stake. It kind of sounds like you're talking about proof of stake where it's backed up by assets rather than what people think it's worth. So why would you use a token
Rather than a cryptocurrency? It's a question we actually ask founders all the time. Do you really need a token for this? And most of the time, the answer is no. Some of the time, there is a really good reason behind it, why it has to be in a certain closed ecosystem. And those reasons really vary. And it could be how it functions in the network. It could be the way that you want to raise financing to take non-dilutive financing and to distribute dividends, which might look a bit different from how a utility token would actually function on your platform. Does that make sense? I can't say how much I would love for utility tokens to be a real thing for US regulators, because this is on live stream, so I'm going to get in trouble.
We're working.
But I mean, I really believe in all types of tokens, personally, not speaking for Status Group. And security tokens are just one thing, and I think they're more useful on the financing side than anything else. Can you repeat the question? They want it louder for the live stream, I think. Oh.
Who's done the best job recently of launching a security token?
You know, I think we haven't really seen the most successful and excellent way to go to market with a security token yet. I would love to give you an answer and say, this is the best one. I haven't seen one that really differentiates, where I can say, that's it. That's the gold standard. We're waiting on the gold standard. Oh, really? Oh, nice.
Great minds think alike.
I don't think anybody's done a good job of actually developing a way to take a token and turn it into a functional business.
It's super early days. And I believe in certain founders, right? I believe in people who are super reasonable and who want to run a good business above all else. And then they use this as a finance mechanism or it makes sense with their business. And so I think there are some founders who are developing security tokens now that I think that's going to be great. But not the gold standard yet.
Cool, all right.
No hard questions. I am, and I really don't want to comment on it on a live stream.
Perhaps Rory's tap.
That's a beer question.
Sorry, the name of time we have to move on. Shayla. Spin class is over. All right. Next up, we have Kevin Owaki, the founder of Gitcoin, which is a platform that's incentivizing the open source environment. He's also the co-organizer of the Boulder Blockchain Meetup. Also a full-time Colorado shiller. Yes, all right. Okay, cool. Take it away, Kevin.
Thank you. What an intro. Thank you, Trevor. As you mentioned, I'm the founder of Gitcoin, which is not a token, not a security token, not a utility token. Although I like the idea of security token land, like you said, Shayla. It sounds like a really lame Super Mario level. I've got Gitcoin stickers, which I will pass around, so please just take one and pass it. My talk tonight is called Making Decentralization 10x Better, and it's based off of this Steve Jobs quote, which goes something like, you don't do things 10% better, you do things 10 times better. And I hope I'm not making myself a cliche by referencing Steve Jobs. I actually think this specific quote is really important for anyone who's launching a startup, because you want to do something that's 10x better than the legacy way of doing things, and then people will care. So just to go through a few examples from the legacy web, and starting with Apple, since we led off with a Steve Jobs quote. So the Apple Macintosh was 10x better the legacy PC that existed at the time. And even though IBM had way more resources, the fact that Apple spent a lot of time thinking about the user interface for the Macintosh and introduced the mouse, I think it's a strong case that the Macintosh was 10x better than the PCs that existed at the time. Keeping with the Apple theme, it's pretty clear to me that the iPod was 10x better than the Walkman. Because you could hold way more songs, because you could go between them, you could create playlists, and for that reason, I think it's a 10x better technology. Keeping with the Apple theme for one more slide, the iPhone, I believe, was 10x better than the BlackBerry because there's all sorts of things that multi-touch and a larger screen enable that the BlackBerry couldn't do, and I think that their attention to detail in their design, and both software and hardware, is part of what made the iPhone 10x better than the blockchain. I'm sorry, did I say better than the blockchain? Nothing's better than the blockchain, better than the BlackBerry. Email, 10x better than OG mail. You can get stuff instantly all the way across the world. There's no stamp. You can send files and information across the world instantly, 10x better. Google, 10x better than Yahoo. And if you think about this, I just think it's so interesting that when the web came about, Yahoo took the card system that you would see in a library and put it on the web. So they took the legacy physical infrastructure and organized the information the way a librarian would. And Google just invented this fundamentally simpler interface that is more oriented around the way that we as humans think and put it online, and they just blew Yahoo out of the water over the long term. Facebook, getting a lot of hate right now in the mainstream web, but it's important to remember the innovation that they facilitated. 10x better than yearbooks, 10x better than the yellow pages, than the phone book, because not only is the information up to date, but you can access it on an iPhone. You can also get in touch with people that you went to high school with, which for like my parents' generation is just like, there's people getting in touch with their high school sweethearts and having affairs, and just like, you know, it's just a change in the way, you know, you used to lose touch with people. That's something that's completely foreign to our generation, is to lose touch with people that you once knew. Instagram, 10x better than the legacy way of sharing photos. I love this picture of the Simpsons episode where Homer has to sit through Patty and Selma's vacation photos because the Simpsons, they used to be so good. All right, so home stretch of these analogies. I'm a big fan of GitHub, if you couldn't tell by the naming convention of Gitcoin, my startup. I was reading this story about how the Blizzard Entertainment, when they first created Warcraft 1, they didn't have version control, so they used to take their code, put it onto floppies, and then pass it back and forth in order to do code review and to share code together. And just, GitHub's 100x better than that, I think. Being a software engineer who has to deal with merge conflicts, I can't imagine doing it if someone was, you know, if we were floppy disks for that. So hopefully I've driven home some of these examples of technologies that have been around that are 10x better. And what I want to talk about for the remainder of the time, given that this is a meetup about decentralized technologies, is how do we create something that's 10x better for the consumer with blockchain? Because like, I think everyone here cares about decentralization. We understand power structures kind of being a little bit, we're not a big fan of legacy power structures, and I think that we're kind of an early adopter kind of group, and I don't think that consumers really care about that. I think that consumers care about convenience, and I think they care about brand, and I think they care about user experience more than whether or not the technology that's backing it is decentralized. You know, I mean, and so I think that one of the things that blockchain really has going for it, and I just really love this Buckminster Fuller quote about you don't change things by fighting the existing reality. You change something by building a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. To me, this is another way of saying, don't take the existing model and make it 10x or 10% better. This is invent a completely new model that is 10x better. And my hope is that blockchain is going to do that for our financial system and make it open source. So this is one of my favorite slides from Origin Protocol, is another blockchain startup out of Colorado, and they just made this really beautiful slide that shows how open wins over closed over time. The hardware layer of computing systems was proprietary, and now it's open. The network layer was proprietary with, I don't know if anyone was an AOL user back in the day, but I was, and I'm really glad that I'm not anymore. And then, so like the thesis is that the difference between Web 2 and Web 3 is we're going to have these fat protocols and these open data layers. And that's important because you can't leave Airbnb because they have a critical mass of market data. You can't leave Facebook because they have your social graph. And it would just be a fundamentally different relationship between consumers and dApps or apps if you could just take your data and transport it to another app if they screw up or you don't like Mark Zuckerberg's hair or something like that. But the fact that there's all this hubbub about Facebook and no one can quit it should show you who has the power in that relationship. And that's one of the things that I think we should change with blockchain. One of the other views that I have about blockchain is that it's going to do to the financial system what Napster did to the record industry. So the internet changed the way we move information across the world by creating a protocol in which you could send information across a computer network without an intermediary, and blockchain can do the same thing but with value instead of information. So if you take all of the changes that happen to our media and to the way we do entertainment because of the internet, and you project them forward in that analogy, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of financial applications launch over the next several years. So, but the thing about everything that I just told you is that it's super abstract. It appeals to you if you have a computer science degree or if you're like a libertarian that is into decentralization. And so my question to you, Decentralize Colorado, is what is the 10x app for blockchain? And I think that we talk a lot about open source money and how it's going to change trading in Wall Street and how it's going to change insurance and supply chain and content creation and jobs and retail and IoT. But where is the 10x app in each of these areas? Because right now, I'm seeing a lot of apps selling to early adopters who care about decentralization philosophically and will put up with the bullshit associated with MetaMask and private key management and waiting for transactions to clear. And I don't think that we're seeing the 10x app coming out yet. I've been experimenting in this space for several years. In 2015, I built an algorithmic crypto trader called PyTrader, which I open sourced, and it wasn't a 10x app, so I lost interest. I built a mining rig and put it in my home office and in my garage and blew a couple power fuses. And I felt like the project I was working on was too commodified and that it wasn't differentiated, and so I moved on. I built a plugin for a plugin called AdBlock to Bitcoin, which basically publishers have a problem with ad space being not monetizable because of AdBlock. And so what we did was we put Bitcoin solicitation QR codes into that ad space if we detected AdBlock existed there. And it was a fun idea, and I got written up in Wired magazine for it, which was cool, but like one person ever used it, so not a 10x app. Built something called You've Got ETH, which was a play off You've Got Mail, if anyone is from the America Online era, and launched that at a hackathon out in Los Angeles. And it's basically like PayPal. The idea was to make it as easy to send cryptocurrency as it is to send email, and a couple people used it, but
We're into the Q&A.
2 minutes left. Okay, so I'll just breeze through the rest of this. Yeah, so I mean, Gitcoin is designed to be a 10x better way of recruiting software engineers than legacy software engineering. So if anyone is a computer scientist out there and has dealt with a recruiter on LinkedIn, you know that they don't represent your best interests. You know that they're going to just spam you until they get a response and then try to get you to take a meeting. They sometimes don't understand the job that they're even repping. And so the idea is, the use case for Gitcoin is that you can place a bounty on a feature that you want developed on your GitHub repo, and then that will be paid out when you actually turn around the scope. So it's a way to lower commitment, way to hire people. You can pay out in your native token. You can try before you buy a relationship with a software engineer. And so for that reason, I think it's a lower risk, higher reward way of hiring a software engineer. And did I mention that we'll do all the sourcing of the software engineer for you if you just post a bounty on Gitcoin, which is, for anyone who's ever sent some LinkedIn cold outreach, I think that's a 10x better way of recruiting engineers. So our long-term vision is to create a mesh network of jobs. So the idea is that in a traditional corporation, you might have a one-to-many relationship between a corporation and their employees, whereas in Gitcoin's network, there's a many-to-many relationship where people are contributing to multiple different places at once. And so the idea is to unbundle jobs, and it's a new way of working with your employer. Like that Buckminster Fuller quote, you don't change systems by by working with the legacy system, you create a new way of working together. So I will end by saying that one of the organizing principles of blockchain is to decentralize power, and it would make sense that we will see blockchain grow in places that are not New York and not Silicon Valley. And for that reason, I'm very happy to be launching a blockchain startup in Colorado. Thank you.
All right, we have enough time for one question for Kevin. Someone want to ask one question? You.
With Gitcoin, you mentioned reducing the risk to the shop looking for the developer if they get to try before they buy. Does that increase the risk to the developer that the shop may say, thank you, your work wasn't quite what we were looking for, although it was?
So repeat the question. So does Gitcoin, by reducing the risk to the employer, increase the risk to the person that's turning around the job because they might just not pay out? So yeah, I mean, luckily on GitHub, no one wants to be a jerk with because your open source reputation is on the line. And so in 400 bounties, we've seen 1, maybe 2 disputes arise out of that. We actually just launched a feature that allows you to screen the applicants to your repo, because there was an anti-pattern we were seeing in which you would someone who was very ambitious and excited would try to work on the bounty, but it turns out once they got into it, they didn't actually have the skills to turn it around. So by allowing people to apply for the position and then very quickly get approval, you're able to screen people who don't have the right portfolio or the right skills to work on their work. And we've seen way less issues since we've launched that. Thank you for your question.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Kev.
All right, so up next, we've got Phil Elsaucer, who is the CEO of a company that has been utilizing Gitcoin in the nascent stages of their project. Phil is the CEO of Market Protocol and also another co-organizer of the Boulder Blockchain meetup, which is meeting this Wednesday and every other Wednesday. In my opinion, it's one of the best meetups in the state. The atmosphere is always electric, and it's kind of a round table atmosphere, so everyone's welcome to throw their hat in the ring. So without further ado, take it away, Phil.
Hannah, do you have the USB drive by chance? Sorry, guys.
Don't you love technical difficulties?
Yep. Thank you guys. Sorry about that's getting loaded up. Thank you. I just want to say thanks a lot to Will and Trevor for hosting this. This is pretty incredible that we all get to be here, so round of applause. Also want to thank Grid Collaborative for hosting us as well. Ignite, I think, and then Market Protocol. Being an entrepreneur in Colorado is pretty incredible. The community here is amazing. There's a lot of people here from Boulder Blockchain. Everyone who's speaking tonight I've interacted with on one way or another, and it's really cool. Our project would not be where it is today without the community that is in Colorado around blockchain. I'm one of the organizers of Boulder Blockchain also. We kind of mentioned it earlier, but we meet every other Wednesday night at Boulder Bits at 6 p.m., so please come up. It's great. If you're kind of new to this space, we have a beginners group too to answer questions and get people just kind of into and learning about how to set up a wallet to how to buy your first cryptocurrencies. It's a little bit about me. I'm the CTO of Market Protocol, which really just means I'd rather be at a computer coding than speaking, but you're stuck with me for a few minutes anyways. And yeah, so one of the things, let's see here, there's supposed to be some notes somewhere in this thing. Maybe they're not around. All right, well, we're just going to make it go. Sorry. Can you maybe help me real quick, just getting that back to play? Yeah. Cool. All right. So people talk a lot about scalability in the blockchain space. And typically when they do that, they're talking about throughput, right? Number of transactions per second. So if we think about Bitcoin, it can roughly process about 7 transactions per second. If we think about Visa, which is something that we use every day on our smartphones to buy things on Amazon or at the store with our credit cards, they're processing roughly 24,000 transactions per second. So for us to achieve the scale that we hope maybe we can achieve, that cryptocurrencies are in our everyday lives and everyday transactions, there's a lot that needs to happen on the technology side of things. One of the things that we don't talk about often, though, is that there's also scalability that needs to happen in price volatility. So these assets, most of the time, are too volatile to be held as a medium of exchange or a store of value for a lot of people. Similar to what Kevin's talking about, we all are willing to take the risk of holding them. We're okay with the volatility. But there's a lot of people out there that aren't. There's a lot of people out there that bought Bitcoin at 20,000 and are really not so happy right now that it's at 6. So in the traditional financial world, we have a lot of tools that deal with this price volatility and this risk that's associated with assets like this. And those have not really made their way into the blockchain space. Just briefly, some comparisons to everyday currencies. We can talk about gold or maybe the euro, and you can roughly correlate that Bitcoin and Ethereum are roughly like 15 times more volatile than those assets. And in addition to that, that's not even considering other altcoins or shitcoins also, which are definitely more volatile than that. So one way we can solve some of these problems is using derivatives. Derivatives offer a way of mitigating risk and transferring risk to people that want that risk. They're essentially a contract between two parties that allows us to derive value from some underlying or reference asset. The S&P 500 is a really great example of that. It trades on the CME and it trades very heavily there. And essentially, it is just two parties that agree to make or lose US dollars based on the price fluctuations of an index of stocks. So you don't have to hold those stocks. You never have to borrow them if you want to be short. You're basically kind of just betting and staking US dollars as those prices of stocks move. So these derivative contracts are essential for businesses to hedge their exposure to things like an airline might hedge their exposure to fuel prices. A bank may hedge their exposure to mortgage rates. Right now, you can't do that in this space. There's no ability really to get access to these instruments that allow us to mitigate some of this risk. Additionally, they allow for short selling. Right now, if you believe a project's not delivering on their promises, if you believe that something's overpriced, it's very hard to put your money where your mouth is and be able to get short exposure to any of these tokens. And the final thing is custody of assets. If I wanted to trade oil, it's very hard to physically move barrels of oil, store oil, and be able to transact in it. But derivatives allow us a way to transfer that value without actually having to take custody of an asset like oil. And they can do the same thing for us in cryptocurrencies. So there's a few places that you can trade derivatives right now. The CME is a great example of that. They have Bitcoin futures. And some of the comments that were mentioned about from the SEC regarding Ethereum may pave the way for Ethereum futures as well. Trading on the CME is not something that's very accessible to most people. And so the next best option that people often talk about is BitMEX. And it's geo-restricted, so if you're in the US, you're not supposed to be trading there. And there's also, of course, the security issues. Best practice right now in this space, so if you're trading on any of these exchanges, is you remove your funds as quickly as possible to avoid the possibility of being hacked. There are some decentralized exchanges out there that solve the custody of funds issues, but right now they're limited to ERC20 tokens, so Ethereum-based assets. You can't trade across chain, and you certainly can't trade stocks or anything outside of the Ethereum ecosystem. So our protocol solves some of these issues. We allow traders to stake ERC20 tokens as collateral to invest and trade in real-world relationships as well as cross-chain relationships. Just going back real quick. So We do that by using smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain. So our contracts and trades are always fully collateralized. There's no custody of funds issues. You're not giving up your funds to an centralized exchange. They're becoming locked into an Ethereum smart contract. And it also allows people the ability to create contracts themselves. So if you want to trade something someone else is interested in, but you and your friend, that's great. It's as flexible as you could trade the weather tomorrow in Denver, or you could trade the S&P 500. Just a brief kind of schematic of how this works is essentially if Bob and Alice, they deposit tokens into a smart contract. We use an Oracle solution to bring external third-party data onto the blockchain, which allows us to settle the contract and then allocate profit and loss. Our protocol is free to use, and as we mentioned, it is built on the Ethereum blockchain. So one of the problems with that is that we are, of course, beholden to block times and network busyness of the Ethereum blockchain. So things when CryptoKitties happen and just kind of congestion in general, the trades become slower. We mitigate some of that by creating the ability for our order books to be mainly hosted off-chain. So you can sign them cryptographically and submit an order that we know is verified from your wallet, from your address, and then the settlement layer actually happens on the Ethereum blockchain when it needs to. We are the protocol layer, so we allow dApps to be built on top of us. The most kind of easiest example of that is just an exchange itself, so a decentralized exchange that would be built on top of market protocol and allow counterparties to find each other and trade. There's also infrastructure that can be built for portfolio tracking and risk analytics as well. So we talk a lot about utility tokens, and I think it's a really great point. But the thing that happens with most people is that they have utility tokens, and the utility that you're consuming from that token, in my mind, is often outweighed by the risk of holding it. The price can swing 100x to back down. It happens with a lot of the tokens. And so if you're trying to build a business on top of a utility token where you need to hold it, there's no ability right now to separate that utility from the volatility in two different pieces. So the ability to do that, to essentially allow people to consume utility without being exposed to the risk of holding a token, is something that's essential and we can do now with our protocol. In addition to that, we can offer cross-chain exposure. So you can go on a decentralized exchange like DDEX or Radar Relay, and instead of being only able to trade ERC20s, you could trade Ethereum versus Bitcoin, Ethereum versus Zcash, or a stablecoin versus any of these as well. And finally, stablecoins offer a really interesting way to recreate some traditional relationships with our protocol. Using something like Tether or Make or Die, you can create relationships like we've mentioned with the S&P 500, or traditional commodities like oil, or even carbon emissions. We have a group in Singapore that's looking to build on top of our protocol to allow a carbon emissions index to be traded. I'm going to kind of wrap up there real quick, but just want to invite everyone. We are an open source project who is heavily using Gitcoin. We really invite people to join our community. We've had over 40 open source contributors right now. So if you're interested in the tech, if you're interested in the finance, or just learning more, please, that's, ouch. Please join us. We have a Telegram set up, as well as Discord. You can find it all on marketprotocol.io. And I think that's it. Thanks for having me tonight.
Anyone have any questions for Phil?
So are you saying you can trade tokens for other tokens in different ecosystems?
Yes, I am. So essentially, you would be staking an Ethereum-based ERC20 token to get price exposure to something on another chain.
But however, are you aware of the integer overflow of ERC20 contracts?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So how would you address that? Because you just making more money in exchange with for Bitcoin now. If you open that ecosystem up.
So from my understanding of it, there's not that many contracts that are actually affected by it, and they're being patched. So I'm not sure that it's really a concern for the ecosystem as a whole.
Just referencing the diagram you showed, is there a way to ensure that the information you're getting from the Oracle is totally trustworthy?
So oracles are definitely a point of failure, I think, in terms of the blockchain in general. So there's a few different solutions that we're looking at in order to make sure that the data that we're getting is valid. That being said, all those solutions still have the possibility for invalid or manipulated data to come onto the blockchain. Just like if you look at traditional financial markets, there's manipulation that happens as well. So there's going to be an arbitration layer in the contracts that allow for disputes to be resolved in a way that would be decentralized in case that does arise, because we think it will.
Cool, thanks a lot, Phil. In case Phil is occupied afterwards fielding questions, I'm going to put you on the spot, Collins, but Phil's co-founder of Market Protocol is also here, so if you have any questions, feel free to pepper them afterwards. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks. We also have a lot of stickers, too.
Yeah, all kinds of swag. Let's have Hannah come on up next, since we just got the pen drive going. Alrighty, so Hannah is joining us all the way up from the Springs. Thank you so much for making that perilous drive. Yeah, perilous. All right, so Hannah Parsons is CEO of Exponential Impact, a new technology accelerator in Colorado Springs. Specific to the Springs or Colorado?
Really Colorado-wide, but we're located
Colorado-wide, perfect. Dedicated to growing technologies in AI, blockchain, and cybersecurity. Hannah has worked with the entrepreneurial community in Colorado for many years and is committed to economic development and job creation through innovation. Hannah is very engaged in policy and frequently serves to bridge the gap between government and industry. Take it away, Hannah.
Thank you.
Is it on?
Nope,
Here,
not on. Okay, there we go. Thank you. Yes, it's a long, perilous drive from Colorado Springs. It took about an hour, I think, maybe a little less. So Exponential Impact is a technology accelerator that is focused really on job creation and innovation throughout the state of Colorado, though we are headquartered in Colorado Springs. We have 4 teams actually in town this summer for an 11-week program. 2 of those are blockchain companies, and maybe some of you will meet them over the course of the summer. The goal is for them to stay in Colorado, so only one of the teams was from Colorado. The other 3 have come to the state with the intention of staying. So Exponential Impact, my entity, is a nonprofit that is an economic development driven organization, but we are paired with a private seed fund that does make investments and take equity. So just to be clear on how that works, whether you care or not. So I thought I was going to have to go last, and that was going to be a real bummer to talk about government as the last one. While I love that, oh, that's a bummer. Does that show well? Anyway, I just want to do a quick civic engagement baseline. So do a quick question. How many of you know who your Colorado State legislators are? And be prepared, I might actually call your bluff if you, no, I'm just kidding. So do that again. How many? Okay, not very many. How many are you registered to vote in the state of Colorado? Okay, that's a little bit better. How many know your local municipal, city or county municipal leaders? Okay, this is good. How many of you ever written, emailed, called, or something, one of your legislators for a request or a problem? Okay, that's very good. That's what I needed, was just the baseline. So what I wanted to do is just talk about the political climate. Is it off this chart? PowerPoint sucks. We couldn't use our Mac, so I apologize for for the alignment. So,
most of it.
all right. Well, we'll talk it through. Somebody else who can run a PC, can you see if you can shrink it?
It's a Linux box. Sorry. Linux doesn't play nice.
Maybe we can still Kevin's Mac.
Nah. If you want, honestly, it's going to be a way much pain than we can do right now. I would.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay, well, we'll just talk it through. So if I were going to ask a question, how many of you would say that Wyoming was the best state for blockchain in the country based on their laws? Right? Okay. Very good. Oh, we're working on it. Okay, well, that is true, but how many of you knew that well, it's not true, but it's the perception is true, but how many of you would say that knew that they had to do that as a cleanup because they had really terrible legislation that preceded that? Some of you. So very few people know that Wyoming didn't just suddenly emerge as a blockchain capital of the country. They had a really shitty bill that was introduced that was going to subject all cryptocurrencies to Money Transmitters Act the year before. So they ended up establishing a blockchain council that then caused all these people to work together and then come forward with some great legislation for their state. So we've got things that are going on in multiple state levels, and people like to hold Wyoming up as the example of the best case scenario. And then we have, thank goodness for people like Shayla who know what's going on with the SEC and can talk about securities, right? That's really helpful because most of us and your legislators aren't going to be able to do that. And know, we may catch the headlines like Ether not being deemed maybe in somebody's opinion as a security, but you may not know the ins and outs about when you're filing your business, how that's going to structure. We're seeing other things happen in New York. I think their session is still at play, so we'll see what happens there. But then other states have made attempts to make either introduce negative bills about blockchain technologies and positive. And some of those, like the state of Tennessee, it made it all the way through their state legislature and then was not signed by the governor. And so you got to think about what's going on here. So what happened in Colorado? So how many of you know about House Bill 1814-56 that was introduced? Okay, so this was what's interesting is this started as a really bad bill when it first was introduced. It was not introduced until April 25th, which is really late in the session as far as legislation is concerned. And so this bill initially was going to introduce really bad Money Transmitters Acts, meaning all the cryptocurrencies would be subject to the Money Transmitters Act. So that was one of the bills that was introduced. And what happened was, very few people know that was introduced. The legislator then got an earful about how terrible this was going to be, and he immediately said, oh gosh, that's not what I meant to do. Easy enough, we'll just drop it. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the process here in a minute, but legislators only get 5 bills. And they have to run the title early in the process. So here's this bill that's no longer going to be run, and it has a Money Transmitters Act title. So I got a call because we had some people come to Colorado from California, and they hired some lobbyists, and they were going to take this bill and copy and paste all the positive legislation that happened in Wyoming and try to introduce that into state law for Colorado. And so many of you were brought into this equation to come testify for bills. We had lots of conversations, dinners. The bill changed numerous times. But essentially what happened was process matters, and this bill eventually did not pass. So there were some good things that came out of it, but what we were worried about kind of happened, not too badly, is that Colorado Springs, some of the articles said, missed the opportunity to embrace some really strong blockchain legislation. Well, that wasn't really the full story about what happened. So that's one bill that we saw this session. Senate Bill 18086 is another bill that has to do with more cryptology in the state records. So this was a bill that was introduced for the purpose of having state agencies just look for their own purposes for records on what is the potential use and positive aspects of distributed ledgers and blockchain technology for state records. So that was really the minimum of what the bill was going to look at. And so they had a nominal amount of money dedicated to help state agencies and OIT and the Office of Information Technology Security Officer all explore and help state agencies explore blockchain for their own purposes for state records. So this one, even though it didn't really receive a lot of attention, was actually a very positive bill as far as the state government was concerned because in my opinion, sometimes the state agencies and the regulators, the people doing the work, it's much more important how they see this information and how they process it on an administrative side than how things happen at the state legislature. So what now? So this is too big. It says, are we a good state for blockchain? Are we a bad state for blockchain? Well, the point I want to make with this is that it is not a black and white scenario. Just because you don't have Wyoming's bills does not mean Wyoming is a better state to run blockchain companies or startups. And just because you don't have some of this, it doesn't make it bad. Also, it doesn't make one state that has great laws the best state because there are so many other factors that come into play when it comes to running your business. So That bill that would have introduced all the legislation that was introduced in Wyoming did die. It never had a chance of passing, just to be clear. It didn't die at the 11th hour. If it had passed, I think it's very unlikely Governor Hickenlooper would have signed it. And so what he did as an alternative is he issued an executive order, B 2018-002, which creates the Council for Advancement of Blockchain Use Technology. This is exactly what happened in Wyoming. So they had a bad bill. They needed to do a major cleanup. They pulled all the different parties together to try to put together positive legislation through a council that they could then introduce with the next session. And that's what's exactly what's happened in Colorado. So as I mentioned, legislators each get 5 bills. They can introduce up to 5 titles. They are working now to identify what bills they want to pass in 2019. And so if they get 5 bills, that's how a bad bill that got amended, and like a bad bill's title got used to run positive legislation. It's because they only get 5. So the work for running legislation that's going to pass, that's going to be successful, starts now. So very likely the legislators who are going to engage and introduce positive legislation in 2019 for blockchain or other things is starting now. They will likely have drafts of those bills ready in the fall. And remember, I told you that other bill was introduced in April 25th. That's way too late in a session to introduce a bill that's this dynamic. So January through May is when session is actually in effect. And so what are the reasons that bills have opposition? So there are many, right? So one is political. Sometimes things fall down to party lines. It's just very political, Republican, Democrat. Most of it happens at the state legislature is on this line. Blockchain was not that. Sometimes it's administrative, and this means there are people who have been appointed by a governor to run an office, or there's some staff that have really strong feelings about why this won't work. We saw a little bit of that this year. Sometimes it's staff capacity. So sometimes it's about the capacity of staffing. Is like, great, you can't introduce this bill and then force me and my staff to take it on. We don't have any blockchain experts. We don't have people who can actually make this happen. And very often it's funding. So one of the things that accompanies legislation that generally has a lot of change in it is something called a fiscal note. And so if a bill passes that's going to require a lot of the state government to do something, it also has a fiscal note that gets that office or that department some funding to carry out those tasks. The bills we saw this session had no fiscal notes, which meant the administrative offices that would have had to enact all the change would have had no additional resources to get it done. And so sometimes it's just a matter of funding, and often it's a mix of all of these things. So what we saw this year, though, was the bill died, and literally within days you see this headline that Colorado pursues ICO fraud as part of Operation Crypto Sweep. I mean, the timing couldn't have been better for this to happen. So essentially what was being introduced that people were fighting very hard, and many of you had been called to give testimony. Some of us did, because we gave testimony that it was good legislation. Even if it wasn't going to pass, we still testified this is good stuff. But then here we go with it. We find out the security commissioner for the state of Colorado was working some cases that if that legislation had passed would have nullified some of the work that they were doing. So they needed some way to continue to have some teeth of sorts to still carry out an action against people that were really bad actors. So here's what I observed is during the process, we have this enormous gap right now. So you have industry over here and government over here. You have industry that's coming to testify and say it's not a security. You have government over here saying blockchain equals Bitcoin equals trafficking of some kind, right? So we had people testifying as to why their tokens were not securities when you have legislators here who still don't understand what blockchain is. So the gap is enormous, and it was enormous for that session. And so what can we do about this? So my stance has always been for people in blockchain companies to educate your legislators. Well, first you got to register to vote. Second, you need to identify your legislators, and that's like Senate, House, all of them, especially at the state level. Federal also, but state level is a really great next step. Schedule meetings with those right now when they're not in session. Don't wait until they're in session and try to talk about a bill. Do it now, and tell them what you do. Tell them what your business is. Talk about what Kevin was talking about, why it's a 10x application is so much better. Like, what problem are you going to solve? Because most of them, they've got to understand impacts of medical marijuana on children with autism. They've got to understand what a sales tax increase might mean for state transportation and infrastructure. They need to know implications for broadband. Like the breadth of what they need to know for a legislative session is really wide. And so if you can help them understand what you do, and they can have you as a point of reference as a company and what you're trying to solve, then that's what they care about. They don't want to shut you down. But all they're hearing is about securities laws and trafficking and Bitcoin. Most legislators still equate blockchain with Bitcoin only. And so the more you can educate them, the better. Help them understand that, back to that earlier point, if, like Shayla made, is if you need tokens, which many don't, but if you do, tell them why and explain what's the difference between a utility token and a security token. These are all foreign concepts still. And then if you do need a token, explain the reasoning. Why do you need that? And then show them what would be the impact. So if they pass legislation that makes all token securities or make some sweeping laws, what impact would that have to your business? Explain to them how that halts the work on your project. These are the things that people have not yet taken time to do with most legislators, and I guarantee you that the opposition to these bills is working the other side of this. So whether it's the Banking Commission, could be somebody who might start working this. There are multiple others. And so the more businesses get in front of legislators to explain what is it in a very elementary and basic way, how it impacts your business, how many people you employ, what the long-term ramifications are, that's really valuable. And then engage with this council. I think there's several of us who are going to be on this council with the governor's appointment to do just this, is to look at what are the best laws that we can now look at other states, look at our existing business climate, because I guarantee you the state of Colorado has no desire to shut down innovation in blockchain. Couldn't be further from the truth. And so if you know people who are on the council, and I'll be happy to connect you and help you understand who those are, then we can help. Paul's on it. You're on that. Paul Quigley, myself, and so we will be looking across the board to see what kind of legislation needs to happen. But we're going to need input from industry. So let us know how we can help you. And this is me. If you would like to contact me, I mean, I do what I do so that you don't have to, hopefully. So hopefully you can build your businesses, and we make sure that the political climate and the administrative climate at the state level is really strong. So with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we ran into the Q&A time.
Oh, good. Sorry.
This is being live streamed, so your info is being broadcast
Perfect.
to the world. Find Hannah afterwards if you have any questions for her. Don't know how long you guys are sticking around.
We'll stick around.
Okay, cool.
All right, and John, if you want to make your way down, we will bring it on home here. Is that the Denver guy? There he goes.
Sorry, I wasn't wearing my glasses, so
Yeah.
that meant nothing to me.
Sorry, yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
All right. So John Poller is a juggernaut in the local blockchain community, CEO of Opolis, which is seeking to decentralize employment in general. Yep. That's for the live stream. Yeah. And then John put on the largest Ethereum hackathon to date, and we're going to crush that next year as well. So John's here to talk about something super exciting for the local community, and I will stop talking now.
Cool. Thanks, Trevor. Hi, I'm John. So this is up here, right? So it's the same. Collaboratory, you guys can see it? Beautiful. All right, cool. So I'm not here shilling like 4 other things that I usually shill. Not Colorado? Well, I'm going to shill Colorado for sure. That's actually what I'm shilling mostly today. So if you don't know who I am, we hosted this little thing called ETH Denver in February. Who, just out of curiosity, who made it? Raise your hands. Oh my gosh, lots of people. So ETH Denver was really what I call an anti-conference. Sorry for those of you that love conferences, but like I don't. I go to them as a necessary thing, but for me, it's really about building and creating and unlocking creativity in human beings that can move to the next iteration of what we're going to do as people. So ETH Denver was kind of a crazy experiment, and we didn't know how big it was going to be. In fact, so we had 1,500 people from 23 countries, 31 states, 58 sponsors, over 20% gender diverse and over 50% overall diversity. It was pretty crazy. But the thing that we noticed that happened was pretty common of hackathons, which is everybody comes and builds something cool, but then it just like stops. Y'all see that, right? So we had 170 projects. It's insane, right? So go to the dev post, go to the ETH Denver dev post, and we had so many cool projects that just, you don't hear about them. Most of them had full-time jobs. Most of them were just doing this for fun. It's whatever it is, right? So we want to create a full cycle continuity of building education and community. So the collaboratory isn't really a co-working space. So a lot of you have heard about maybe the sports castle being used as a co-working space. Well, it's not just about that. It's about something much, much bigger than that. So envision more of a creative studio, a geographic-centric place where people can come and learn, collaborate, and build community around cool projects, but in a very narrow focus of decentralized ledger technology. So the Crypto Curious, we had, I think it was something like 50% of the hackers actually had never built an application with Ethereum or anything like it before. So, and that's a really, really big number. But giving them a venue to do it was really cool because, like, where else are you going to do it? There isn't really just a place to go that you can just build cool stuff like that. And, like, without the coordination of the community here, it just wouldn't have happened. So the goal is to create economic opportunity, technology, community, and overall democracy for this decentralized future that we talk about. So the decentralized future is, I mean, frankly, it's why I'm involved in this, because, like, I don't know, I mean, I've done a lot of things over my years in business, and this is just the thing that excites me the most. So the values of this ecosystem that we're going to build is really about those three things, those three pillars: education, community, and biddling. And by the way, there was a Twitter battle about how you actually say this meme, and it's biddle. So we can put that on the internet, right? It's on the internet now, so biddle. And the reason why I don't like conferences, too much talky. Not enough walkie. I mean, walkie. Where's Kevin? Yeah, I do. Yeah, she'll get coin. Get coin. At get coin on Twitter. Kevin's a good friend of mine, and we actually see a lot of the same future for the future of work and how things are going to be organized. If you want to know more about that, you can talk to him about Gitcoin or talk to me about Opolis. But for this purpose, we're talking about why hackathons are important and why the aftermath and the continuity of the circle is important. So education, first off, you got to give people an opportunity to get in, right? You can't just expect people in this emerging technology to have any clue what the hell they're talking about or what anybody else is talking about. So giving them a safe place to come and just literally learn, right? No exploitation, no extraction of dollars. Just come in a room and just learn from the people that are building this. Community. Collaboration is the cornerstone of community. If we don't work together, we're not going to build anything, because decentralization depends on people working together, not trying to compete with each other. And then biddling. If you're not building something cool, then I don't know what you're doing. Because if you look at this trading frenzy that we had over the last 12 months, how much building happened amongst all of that? Not much. So we're not going to have much to trade or talk about if we don't build. So instead of hodling, we talk about biddling in the Ethereum community, or even in any sort of dApp community. where we're building decentralized applications, that's the most important component. So we focus on that. In fact, I literally have not checked prices on any cryptocurrency in over 4 months. Strict discipline. All right, now Colorado, chillin' and chillin'. We're a very pragmatic state. Hannah was talking about the politics of this, but the beautiful thing about Colorado is we're not terribly like polar. We're pretty realistic people, and we don't like, even if I disagree with somebody politically, I'm not going to like call you out and Twitter hate you. Okay, Colorado just doesn't really do that. So I call us a purple state. Go Rockies. We'll talk about democratizing and decentralizing that franchise at some point. Mark my word, time and date stamp. But the point is Colorado has everything going for it to become the leader in decentralized ledger technology. In fact, Wyoming can boast all it wants about its laws and its legislation, which by all means, kudos. But it's still Wyoming, and last time I checked, I'm not moving there anytime soon. So ETH Denver, we talked about the support. It was really, really crazy. If you didn't go, shameless plug, you better go next year. It's going to be incredibly competitive to try to get in. We're not going to make it. We're not going to make it 5,000 people. We're just not. And the reason for that is not because we couldn't, but because we don't want to dilute the value of the experience. We don't want to just let everybody come in. We're not going to charge, ever, for hackers and participants to come. It will be 100% sponsor supported. Gitcoin. Opolis. Others. Like I said, we had 58 sponsors, so we really don't want to pollute it with the bullshit. Excuse my French online. But the point to this is going to be a main stage event every year. Now, what this gets into is what happens after. So the campus activities that we're going to build. Now, by the way, just to be clear, if you haven't followed with this, we are in discussions with the Sports Castle ownership to turn that into an innovation and education campus. That entire block is owned by the same people, and we're discussing with them a project that would be massively impactful and important to the Denver community. Probably between 35 and 50,000 square feet of innovation space, specifically for this. Now, what would happen, okay? Not just co-working. Co-working is cool. I co-work right now. Anybody been to Enterprise for Open Blockchain Day? Okay, so Open Blockchain Day, just a quick plug, Thursdays at Enterprise on 30th and Lawrence. You can come and co-work for free. Sponsored by Colorado Blockchain, Ethereum Denver, and Opolis. You can come and just hang out. There's nobody selling you anything. Doesn't matter. You can just come in and out, whatever you want, and it's really, really fun. But that's just one component. Education, technical demonstrations, meetups, project hackathons. So mini hackathons, like not the main crazy 2,500 person hackathon, but like very precise hackathons. Community building, social gatherings, extended stays, and really 24/7 stuff. Now, if you notice what I'm saying here, supporting projects are going to be able to do this. How many of you have interest in a project outside of the Colorado ecosystem that would be really, really cool if they came here and spent some time? Anybody? Everybody, I would assume. We'll just kind of jump down to this. Okay, so I've been traveling for the past 5 weeks, going to pretty much every conference you can think of, and I am tired. And I really don't like conferences to begin with, so most of this is about creating relationships for me. And these projects here that are listed on this sheet have expressed interest in coming to Colorado specifically to build community, to connect, to build technology, to build companies, to invest. So this isn't just a local Colorado ecosystem thing. This is a convergence of the ether space with the larger decentralized community. So what we're doing is we're building a space that they can come. They can come for a couple of weeks, co-work, co-live. They can build a mini hackathon. They can create community. They can market their products. They can recruit people to work on their technology. And we can further expand the economic impact of the Colorado ecosystem. We have every component that makes sense for this. We have people. We have technology. We have the culture. We have the social vibes. We have everything that makes sense. And every one of these projects understands that because they were at ETH Denver and they saw it. And they're all 100% committed to supporting this. So Hannah's here. She's one of our main team players. We have several people from the ETH Denver community that were also, this is just a fraction of the people that we have supporting this. But we have lots of people that are involved to build this. In fact, we have support from the Office for Economic Development and International Trade. We have support from the Colorado Technology Association. We have support from every corner of the state to say, yes, we need to build something like this. And the really cool thing is Kevin's boss, Joe Lubin, if anybody knows Consensus, this is not a Consensus production, by the way. This is a community ecosystem. So one of the things that Joe and I have talked about is tokenizing this ecosystem. So when we get ready to do this, and this is going to take a little bit of time, so keep in mind that block is big and the building needs a little retrofitting. So the likelihood is that this is going to be ready in the next 12 months is a little shaky, but 18 months could be realistic. We're going to tokenize the ecosystem and create joint ownership and value for the entire community. So people from outside of the state and inside of the state can work together to create an ecosystem that has shared value, shared contribution, and ultimately shared outcomes for everybody here locally. And building Colorado to be the #1 location for decentralized ledger technology in the world here in Colorado. So that's it. If you want to get a hold of me, you can get me here. If you have any questions, I guess I'll take a few now, if there's time.
We've got time for one question.
1.5 questions.
So how do we get involved and how do we help you?
So email me. That's the first place. So I have a filter, and I'll just be very direct about it. Lots of people talk about helping, but it's really about your proactivity. So if you want to email me and we can talk a little bit more about how it might make sense. We're going to need lots of help, of course, both planning and operationally. We are also open to community input on programming or structuring or anything like that. So if there's anything you want to contribute that way, that'd be fine. So just start with an introduction and we can connect from there. Cool?
All right. Thanks a lot, John. Exciting stuff for the community, for sure. Okay, a little housekeeping. We have this venue for 10 more minutes, and we still have to clean up and whatnot. So if your night's not over, feel free to take things over to Rory's Tavern across the street, kind of a Irish pub vibe, and feel free to continue any conversations that you started over here. Thanks again for coming out, everyone, and we will see you next month on July 23rd. Thanks.